Good afternoon, Australians. It's me, a Cypher, and I have returned. So this is my new channel. It's going to be dedicated mostly to Australian issues regarding current times. However, I will comment on certain other aspects regarding society and the things that interest me, depending on popularity and depending on who really gives a crap. So here goes. This first video is going to be called Australia, You Are the Problem. Now, given that we are sitting in the day of the 10th of June 2020, by now many of you would realize that we've been living under the fear of coronavirus for a good few months now. In the case of Australia, most things shut down on or about the 23rd, 22nd of March this year, with our illustrious Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, calling for, the shutdown of all non-essential services and, businesses. However, it was a very arbitrary decision on what he considered to be essential, non-essential, because tobacconists, bottle shops, people like that managed to remain open through this whole event. And there was no particular issue apparently with them, being open at all. But if I wanted to go to the gym or participate in some other activity that was good for my health, no. You're putting people at risk. You're worse than the devil. How dare you step outside? And then there's also the claim that the government will, in the case of state governments, will be enforcing these rules. But in my particular state, I never saw such things. I never even heard of people being fined for being out. Oh, well, no, I tell a lie. I did hear about people being fined, but only when they're being extremely overt about their activities, like going to the beach and such. But I, as an individual, never heard of such people getting fined from stepping out of the house, to do pretty mundane things. But I digress. So, over the past weekend, there has been major protests in my country regarding the incident that occurred in the US a few weeks ago now, about a gentleman who was killed in police custody. Now, I'm not going to comment on the gentleman at this point in time, nor am I going to make any, claims about policing and what have you at this time. My particular point in this video is going to be about the protests that have happened as a result of that. Now, being that I am obviously an Australian, and we do not have anywhere near the black population that America does. And obviously, I'm quite, that's just how it happens to be. We have quite a relatively small indigenous population in this country. And they still took it upon themselves to gather thousands of people around this country to take to the streets and protest about the death of a black man in America, and somehow they managed to spin that to be about protesting about 430 Indigenous deaths in custody since 1991. Let that sink in. Now, call me stupid, call me ignorant, but the Black Lives Matter organization, if you even want to call it that, is a complete and utter farcical group of people. We've known this for some time, that anyone with a cursory bit of inquiry knowledge can simply look up the financial backers or the financial stakeholders that fund this, essentially a corporation, and can see that anyone with half a brain can see that these protests were just financially incited by the stakeholders. Why else would these be happening? And then, conversely to this, our government has been saying that for the past weeks that if you gather an X amount of groups, we will fine you and make sure that you are prosecuted, because we must keep you safe. You, really safe. If we have to put a gun to your head to keep you safe, we will do so. However, we will certainly not make this the case if you decide to protest over pretty much anything. except, the lockdown. If you protest against lockdown, we'll make sure that we demonize you to the media, we'll make sure that we delegitimize you and make all your claims seem to be absolutely absurd. But if you protest about essentially a non-issue in our society, and especially in white society, all is forgiven. Please take to the biggest, most profound areas you can and protest to your heart's content. We're not going to prosecute a single one of you. It's perfectly fine. Now, myself, as a rational human being, would think this is absurd. And it is indeed absurd. But my point is, there is a large issue at stake here. Now, for a good number of weeks, I have been calling for, essentially encouraging people to scrutinize, to be skeptical of the government decisions to keep us isolated. Now, there are and admittedly, there are small groups at this point in time who have been taking to the streets, again, in relatively small numbers compared to Black Lives Matter, and essentially calling for an inquiry, or essentially calling for an end to these lockdowns, to these arbitrary lockdown isolation measures. And I don't agree with every single one of their points. However, I do applaud them for going out and taking some action. So this brings me back to my initial title of the video, which is Australian, you are the problem. Australia, you are the problem, essentially, because you are quite content to sit at home, twiddling your thumbs and going, oh gee, I hope the government takes care of me. Whilst there are people out there who are like, our government is largely incompetent and can't, organise a shag and a brothel, but we're suddenly going to be able to, believe every single thing they've been telling us because they're keeping us safe. Now, we've had a number of slogans in the past few weeks of keeping us safe, flattening the curve. Of course, social distancing is 5 meters distance between each other. Now, whenever you go into a singular shop, especially the big box shops in this country, Bunnings, Coles, Woolworths, you'll hear this message reiterated time and time again. However, if you want to take to the streets and protest for the most at this point, who gives a crap what you're protesting about? It's just a bunch of people, gathering around and screaming, and a lot of self-loathing white Australians screaming about the most ridiculous things. It doesn't matter. The government won't do anything. But you will never take to the streets and protest your freedoms. Your fundamental freedoms of movement, freedom of expression, freedom of essentially association, are being eroded day by day. You will not take to the street to protest that. But if a black man is killed in America, we need literally everyone from our communities to go into the city centre and scream. Interesting point, is it not, Australia? We have such ridiculous priorities in this country. We are suddenly happy to allow our government to strip away our rights day by day, as long as we can get access to our fucking alcohol, our smokes, and our $17 latte from Starbucks. Australia, you are the problem. You have become so blinded by the bread and services your government force feeds you that you are unwilling to actually step back and look at what really matters. And I shall be addressing that in the next video. Talk to you soon.